Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today I'm going to talk about depression and suicidal thoughts and suicides and suicidal attempts within our Muslim community. I'm not giving any professional advice here, it's just my humble observation. So few things, some will apply to family members and others will apply to community leaders in our establishments, mainly the masjids. So the first thing is with community members. Unfortunately, we have a lot of our community members, and I know people will say, "Well, you're talking about faith and all that." Yes, I am going to have to talk about faith, but I have to be also keeping a balance. Um, from my personal experience and dealing with others, when there's a disconnect um, between us humans and our creator, and you could look into this into psychology, and even now doctors, they're trying to see, even with regular medicine, they're trying to do cognitive medication where actually they try to get the body to actually heal itself. And we know that depression and all these negative feelings, they will actually weaken the immune system. So now they're trying to get the body to work on its own, and that is, believe it or not, by kind of like changing our mental state and bringing God into the equation is very essential. I'm not saying that every person who is depressed lacks faith. I'm not saying that, but faith does help. See, this is the key. In our religion, it is mentioned that even prophets, when they go through hardship, they call out to God and they say, when is time for that relief to come? But the fact that they connected to God helps them to get through it. So, and then the second part is yes. Um, so I want to be careful before even I jump to the second part. I'm not saying that for every depression there's lack of iman, but I'm saying a failure to deal with depression might be directly connected to lack of faith. So that's what I'm trying to say here. Um, the other thing that I want to, the second part is a lot of people say don't seek professional help. Um, I'm against that. I would say seek professional help, but just be careful who you're going to. I know a lot of people say, oh, you're anti medicine, you're anti, and I'm not. Reality tells us that there are some who will just prescribe things left and right, medication left and right. And if you look at those disclaimers, even antidepressant medicine, they will tell you sometimes that you'll have suicidal thoughts. And that's the thing. Also, sometimes you go to someone who just listens to you but not give you the solution, does not advise you on how to cope with it. And then they will lead you to things that will never work for you. Again, just be careful who you're talking to. Now, the other problem, in addition to looking for the right person to talk to, um, is our institutions, our Islamic centers. Unfortunately, we looked at other establishments, our religious establishments, and we started saying, well, they're not doing things right. And we even started questioning their religion and all that. That's a different topic. Um, but we felt like we're immune to this, like it's not going to happen to us. And honestly, I saw this happening even when I was in college, which you're talking about in the years 2002, 2003, and all the way up to 2006, when I was actually at U Albany and Hudson Valley Community College, which are the two local colleges here, including myself. We did not fit into that established criteria for anyone to be accepted into the masjid. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't doing anything crazy. Um, but I was young. Um, I came here by myself. I didn't have my parents with me, and almost like no one knew how to deal with me. So the easiest thing is to kind of like not, um, you know, open up in the way that they should have. I'm not blaming anyone. It's just the culture that we have within our masjids. But at the same time, it's a wake up call for all of us. A lot of people, what they're doing, like for instance, for me, I found my safe haven, and it's because of God within the Muslim Student Association. Imagine if I didn't have that. I know a lot of people, sorry, that's my son. I know a lot of people who actually didn't find that. They didn't find a place within the Muslim Student Association, and they just went off on their own, and they started questioning their own existence, and they had nothing to do with religion. And again, things will pile up on for them. So please open up your doors. Coming up, I always say, don't change the message, change the way that you deliver the message. A lot of people, and this is not just for students, it's for families who are not really, I don't like to use the word religious because honestly, only God knows your level of faith. And we're not even in a position to start judging each other and say, well, you're not religious enough or you're religious enough. So that should be taken care of in a way that we should stop judging each other. But let's say that there are people who are obviously and clearly still struggling with their iman, still struggling with their deen, even like the basics. It's really interesting for me that to see that masjids open their doors to non-Muslims, and they open their doors to them the way they come, and we call that interfaith, while we're actually pushing away our own community members. So what do I mean by don't change the message, but change the way that you're delivering the message? I know every message has to have its standards, and I am for that. Do not violate that, because once we compromise that, it's not a message anymore. But it's how you actually present that. Why are we too nice to those who are not members of our religion? We should. That's a beautiful thing. I'm for that, and we should continue doing that. But when it comes to our own members, it's like sometimes, don't get me wrong, like the devil is at the door, and we shouldn't do that. Be nice, even if you have to change. We're building things, and we're having community centers, and we're all these, modify the masjid in a way that we could make it, again, do not compromise your standards, but maybe a transitioning place where people who are struggling, they would come to that. Don't even make it part of the masjid, but it's under the masjid's supervision, where they come in, and they're accepted the way they are initially, kind of like probation program, where they feel, okay, come the way you are. We're here to work with you. We're here to kind of like help you integrate into, or to integrate back into your community. And then slowly they will start to learn more about their religion, and then they could transition back into the masjid. But just shutting the door and saying we're not accepting, I know a lot of stories where people just, not just they didn't go to the masjid, but they end up, um, sorry about my son, they end up even leaving religion because of those who think they're actually trying to protect our religion. God will protect the religion. Again, we have to do our parts, but maybe that transitioning stage. Now the other thing is, I'm noticing, forget about COVID, even prior to COVID, most masjids open up for halaqas, and halaqa where specific topics are actually decided by the imam, and people just attempt to learn what has been decided by the imam. Most of the time, it's not the other way around. It's not issues being raised by the community and addressed by the imam. And then prayer times. Right? It should change. More things have to change within our masjids, where people feel that the masjid caters to their needs. And yes, social activities, family days and nights, where people who are struggling, that would come in, professional help. Try to partner with well-established people in their field, especially when it comes to psychology, and those areas where they'll be very honest and sincere in addressing things, where people could come in and just kind of like talk about their issues. The other issue is, unfortunately, we hire an imam for $30,000 with no training in this field of psychology specifically, and we just tell them to do counseling and things like that. And again, most of the time, the imams, because they're used to preaching, I'm not saying all imams, they're used to preaching, so they don't listen. They talk more than they listen. It doesn't help. So we need to have that partnership with others who will train our imams, and at the same time offer those services to our community. Now, I'll move to families. The other thing that I noticed is because some parents, unfortunately, they lack the foundation when it comes to religion. And don't get me wrong on this, not all, but I'm talking about specifically those who feel because they do not have the basics, then it's almost, it becomes an excuse for them not to give anything to their kids religion wise. And they would stay away from the masjid because they'll be judged themselves. And again, yes, it does happen at times where the parents are being judged, but continuing on that path of being wrong and not, committing to your religion doesn't fix it. You're just making things worse for yourself. Yes, I know it does depend a lot on your community. Are they accepting of you and your children? Are they judgmental or not? Um, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't yourself try to learn about your religion more. Try to make things a little bit better for yourself and your kids, religion wise. Um, just don't try to find an excuse and say, well, my community is not accepting and I'm not strong enough faith wise, so I'm not going to try to educate my kids. It doesn't work that way. Um, you know, Islam is a journey, and you will continue to learn. We all start at different stations, and it's where we end up, which matters the most, rather than where we're starting. But we have to start somewhere. So please reconnect yourself with your community. At times, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to the masjid every single day. It could literally mean as simple as connecting with families that you see that they could help you, and just be willing to actually open up and kind of like, make that friendship, and hopefully things will get better. And I'm not saying eventually you find yourself back in the masjid, but at times that's what happens, especially if your kids start making friends with other kids who go to the masjid, and they start saying we want to go there, to play. And again, everything is intertwined. This is where the masjid says, okay, how do I make that environment where everyone feels they're welcome and we give them the best of services? For me, one of the reasons I didn't want to record this video is because I I didn't want to be among those who just react to things, but just looking at the amount of reaction that people are having, from imams, from regular people, it's amazing that everyone is kind of like reacting and giving their own kind of like approach to things. It's like all of us are professionals. Again, I'm not speaking here, and I mentioned this is not a professional advice. It's just my observation. For decades now, at least 2 decades, things need to change. But the sad part is nothing is changing in the right direction. Yeah, I'm not seeing it happening. Um, People who are trying to make a difference, they're starting to establish what they call them third space. There's even a video that was made. It was a documentary that was made years ago about this, third space. It covers different things, but there are those who don't necessarily fit in specific criterias. So the easiest thing for them, they always go out to look for other, spaces for them to feel welcomed. And this is another big problem that we have, that people feel the need to be helped, but because the masjid fails them in one way or another, um, they find people who are having the same issue, and they normalize that within their own space. And because they are claiming to be Muslims, they end up, at times intentionally or unintentionally, they end up creating spaces that have nothing to do with the religion, but they become religious spaces for them because they want to stay connected to God in one way or another, and because they do not know how, in the correct way according to Islam, and because they have the resources to create their space, then they create that platform, and others will come through that platform thinking that they are still, connected to God through the Islamic path, but they're not anymore. But again, that's something on the masjid to look into and try to fix. Um, Finally, I really don't want anyone to take this personal in a sense that it's a personal attack on anyone, but I really hope that everyone will take this as a personal responsibility, that we're all responsible for this and we all should take part in fixing the problem and not just continuing to push back and blaming the others, because this is what I'm seeing on the internet. Um, those who are not connected to the masjid are blaming those who are part of the masjid. Those who are part of the masjid are blaming those who are not, connected to the masjid. And it's kind of like, it's a blame game, and it has been going back and forth until the next um, uh, case that we have, whether it's a suicidal case or whatever it might be, and then we restart the entire blame game. So I hope everyone who's listening will take that responsibility and make sure that we're doing things according to Islam within the establishments that God, you know, has recognizes His houses, which are the masajids. Because during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, masjids were not only places of worship, they were the center for the community where everything happens, and we just need to bring that back. That's all. I mean, the blueprint is there for us. It's just we're refusing to actually take that and think, because we're afraid and we're not well equipped. We're not ready because our board members mainly are simply um, there to serve the community on the, let's say, experience and lack of experience that they have, and it's kind of like it's run as an organization and not a service center. And that's, I think, one of the biggest problems that we also have. Thank you for listening, and I hope things will get better for us, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.